Now, we've been provided for the first time with a bit of a script here, which I'm not sure I'm going to carry on with this after this meeting, but I'll comply for one meeting and then I'll see what we do at the next one. But anyway, so good evening, everyone. As Chair of the Housing and Asset Scrutiny Committee, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's meeting. I'd like to introduce the Vice Chair, Councillor Ethan Stafford, and we're supported by Steve Griffiths from Democratic Services. I would also like to thank elected members, any members of the public and officers who are also joining us this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points. There are no planned fire alarms, so if the alarm does sound, please treat it as real and follow the instructions or staff to evacuate the building safely. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel for public access. Members are kindly asked to raise their hands when wishing to speak and speak into the microphones to ensure a smooth and recording process. Scrutiny is the cornerstone of good governance. It allows us to hold decision makers to account, examine policies and performance, and ensure that the voices of our communities are reflected in the work that we do. Tonight's agenda includes important items that deserve our full attention and thoughtful discussion. Our role is to provide constructive challenge, not to criticise, but to question, understand, and help shape better outcomes. I encourage open, respectful dialogue and welcome contributions from all members. We'll begin shortly with apologies and declarations of interest, followed by officer presentations and reports as outlined in the agenda. So let's work together to ensure this meeting is productive, focused and beneficial to the communities we serve. So with that, we'll move on to item 1, which is apologies. Steve, I know that Councillor Luke Johnson's had to make a last-minute apology, but I don't know if any others have been communicated. No. Councillor. Okay, so that moves us on to the next one, appointment of any substitutions. Councillor Cobb. So we haven't got one of the nice fancy nameplates that the rest of us have got.
Yeah, she has. So,
oh, she has.
so, yeah.
We can get that to you then. I'll just let Steve bring that round. Item 3, any declarations of interest? Does anyone have any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct? I'm looking straight at Councillor Cowell.
Yeah, just for the public record, as usual, just to point out that I am a council tenant of Dudley MBC.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else got any declarations? Councillor Cook?
I am a tenant of Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council.
Okay, thank you. Any more tenants or declarations? No? Okay. Item 4 is to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting we held on the 23rd of July. Is everyone happy to confirm that this is a true and correct record? Yeah. Sounds like we've got agreement there. Item 5 takes us to the public forum, which allows any members of the public to speak within the remit of this committee. Looking over there, I think we've got a few members of the public. So would any of you like to speak this evening? And so the gentleman here, but just to check, the other two, do you also want to speak after the first gent? Okay. Okay, and are you speaking separately or are you together? Together. Okay, that's fine. Right, so if the first gent, if you'd mind taking this seat here, please. So I think it's 5 minutes that you've got to speak and share anything with us that you wanted to. Obviously, it does need to be within the remit of this committee, but I'll let you know if for any reason it isn't. So, yeah, please feel free to.
I'd just like to thank both Ian and Kathy because they've replied to what I brought up to the last meeting. Currently, my situation has changed a little recently. So, in the letter back from yourself, you stated that the agent has said to your member of staff that they're not willing to work with the council. So why could we not be given a higher banding now that the council know this?
So this is obviously a question about personal circumstances. So I know that both Kathy and Ian will be mindful of what they actually disclose in this meeting. So I'll hand over to Kathy and Ian to answer in the most appropriate way. While Kathy's finding a microphone that works, could you just remind us of your name, please, sir?
Daniel Bartholomew.
Daniel. Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we've been in correspondence following on from your inquiry at the last scrutiny committee. So what I would say, without wishing to go into any detail in a public forum, is that any relevant information that's investigated as part of any case when we're working with somebody will always be taken into account, and any impact that has on a decision around a person's housing status, their band on the register, will be taken into account. So I'm quite happy to speak to you about that separately. I don't think it'd be appropriate, to you to speak about it, but it's certainly something that anybody looking at that kind of information will consider and see whether it changes any decisions or banding.
That's fine, thank you. I'll just speak to you personally then, more personally about the other stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for sharing, coming along tonight. I would say don't feel like you have to wait to these meetings. Obviously, you've got contact details for Kathy and the council and other officers who will be supporting. So don't feel like you've got to wait for these meetings. You can always go directly to them. Obviously, at these meetings, it is generally about the more broader policy side of things. So you're more than welcome to come along, but don't feel like you have to wait for these meetings. Okay. Well, all I'd say to that is, obviously, you came to the last one, and good that, and I'm pleased to hear that you have had a follow-up and support since then. Hopefully, that means now you continue to get that support without coming to these meetings. So, again, feel free, if you don't progress in between meetings, or if you really did struggle, obviously come back. But as I say, in between, feel free to speak with the officers directly, and that might help you a bit more quickly. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the first member of the public spoken. So I'd invite the next member of the public, please. Thank you. Good evening. So I'll just ask if you could both share your names, please. And then obviously, same as we said for Daniel, you've got 5 minutes to make any point that you think is relevant to the committee. And again, we'll let you know if for any reason it isn't. So if you could just start by sharing your names. Thank you. Sorry, I'll just say if you can press the button. Yeah, as soon as you've not been here before. Yeah, so if you speak into that, and obviously. No, absolutely fine. No need to feel nervous.
I am Clarence Stephen Demiri of 66 Park Road, Netherton. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Mrs. Mohini Demiri. I'm married to Clarence Demiri of 66 Park Road, Netherton, Delta Yankee 2 9 Bravo Zulu. All right.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Okay, please feel free to make the point you want to raise.
Okay, we arrived in Dudley about 7 years ago under a homeless situation, and we were provided our current residence by Dudley Council, and we've lived and resided there for 7 years, and we've not been given an appropriate housing. So whilst we understand a lot of the information that's been provided, we continue to stay in our current residence. But the last 3 years, we had a Section 21 non-fault and eventually gone now to a repossession. My question here this evening is, to put it myself, I've got diabetes type 2 and other health related conditions. And I've got me and my husband have got 4 children, which are now, one has moved out and I've got 3 teenagers, and I've been provided, but it's currently overcrowded at the time of 4 and 3 children in the house. But the unnecessary situation here is that we've been provided with unsuitable accommodation, even at the advice of a GP saying it's unsuitable, a flat arrangement, and a blanket policy has been applied. And we think it's unfair and it's not accordance to the Housing Act to be providing families and of a social nature of very close in age, boy and girls. And is it really right to be putting a family through a necessary process of an unsuitable property and then going for a review? Because it's really caused me health conditions, despite MPs, despite having other charities advising them and support mechanism, telling Dudley Housing that the current offer that they've provided is unsuitable. And I think me and my husband have sort of come here this evening to sort of spark that we might have been under the radar. And we just want to highlight that we viewed a property today that's unsuitable, and we're extremely worried and concerned for our children's education. We've got 2 children, one in Dudley College, one in Hales Owen, who's just completed Link Academy. Did remarkably well, but and we've got one that's just started West Midlands Ambulance Service as an apprenticeship. We want to sustain that situation. Me and my husband, unfortunately, are unemployed. I've got health conditions, but we continue. But we would really today say we have a caseworker who works 2 days a week, and we're not getting any progress because of that. And there's loads of other issues, but for now, I'd like my husband to state any other concerns of legislation or legal matter.
Well, I'm sure you said it all, yes.
I hope so.
Mrs. Demilia said it all, yes.
I forgot to bring my
She
water.
just said it all, yes. Regarding the housing issue, yes, specifically, I just wanted to mention that because our legal background, I've got a legal background myself, and my wife in financial industry for FCA. Now, it was FSA before FCA. I just want to remind you that
We're human beings.
Human Rights Act, I don't think is known in Dudley much. It's known, but it's not followed as it should have done. So he has to focus on that and recognize the families, because 7 years in Dudley, we have not seen that. So we just want to remind Dudley, all
Specifically housing.
the leaders of Dudley, just to recognize the ECHR. That's all.
So I think I just want to, if I've got any few more minutes, just to elaborate. So it's the Human Rights Article 8, a right to a life, a right to a private life, and to be able to have a quality life. And whilst GPs and supporting groups are stating that it's unsuitable to put a British family, I'm a British mother with 4 British children, and raised them very, very to my best of to British values, and to respect that we are a family unit. And I feel whilst we're mixed, family, my husband and I are from different backgrounds, but and it's been absolutely difficult to sustain housing in Dudley. But even the process has been, it's deteriorated my health condition, and there's no recognition from Dudley Housing to acknowledge our human rights on this. And we'd really like some support, acknowledgement, and that the system itself is unworkable, especially when offering unsuitable housing, when it's quite common sense. You can't put 5 people in a 3-bedroom accommodation in a flat when the living space, there's no space for a living space. So ideally that's just unsuitable, but yet it's still been offered, even though we've given the law, we've provided legislation, we've provided all the support, but it's not getting through to anybody.
Right. Thank you for coming along. The councillor in me wants to ask you lots of questions about it and your personal circumstances, but this isn't the right environment for that. So I won't do that, but I will hand over. Looks like Ian wants to, who's the cabinet member for housing. He wants to make a contribution. Obviously, actually, no, he'll make the points I think that need to be made, and just make sure you are receiving the support that is available, that lots of people in the borough are chasing. And there is that, this committee deals with lots of issues about demand not being higher than capacity. And of course, that's a big challenge, but I'll hand over to Councillor Bevan to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for coming along this evening and addressing us. It's no easy feat. You said it was your first meeting and you're nervous. This is my umpteenth meeting and I'm still nervous, so that's absolutely nothing to worry about. As the Chair said, this isn't really the forum, and what concerns me, Chair, is that if anybody listening to this meeting is just going to hear rather a bland stock answer, and people are going to go away thinking, well, I haven't addressed that at all. Somebody's turned up tonight, they've asked a question, but as you quite rightly said, this isn't the forum for it. We do operate a very robust application of homeless law. We follow the Housing Act and we make sure that the decisions we make are correct. Of course, we will get it wrong sometimes. This is the first time that this has been brought to my attention, so you're quite right, we shouldn't discuss it any further in here, but I will go away and Kathy and I will have the discussion so I can be brought up to date on it. Demand for our properties far, far outstrips the supply, and if you take that into account and the addition of a robust homeless service, then we are going to get this kind of situation. But before I say anything else about it, I'd like to take the opportunity to go away after the meeting, catch up with the officers, and then I can respond to the residents concerned. If we can make some arrangements, we've got their address. I couldn't get the surname. If somebody can get that for me and some contact details, then I'll gladly follow up.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bevan. Yeah, I think the route to the step forward from here is outlined there. So just making sure that all your details are with Councillor Bevan and the housing team. I would say that, and as Councillor Bevan said, other people might be listening. I think it's important to know that you've got ward members who might not necessarily be in this room. I don't think there are any members from Netherton here, actually. But you can speak with your ward members directly. I know you said you've spoken with MPs, but that actually can be sometimes a more useful and direct way than coming to a meeting like this for ward issues and ward cases like your own. So I can see you want to come back. Technically, you are over your 5 minutes, but happy for you to come up with a quick point, and then obviously we'll just make sure that all your details are recorded so that the follow-ups can happen.
I have made contact with the ward councillor Elaine, but unfortunately she had a bereavement, so she wasn't able to take on this case. I did contact the other members and I didn't get no response, which then I had to contact Codesley member, and obviously that's out of her jurisdiction, but the property was there. But she said that she would contact somebody, but I heard nothing of that. And one of my clear point of answer to the right, so the left honourable gentleman, I would sort of say we're already overcrowded, but being offered another overcrowded situation does not alleviate our situation. Whilst it's robust, there's 60 houses still available on the Freedom of Information Act of the allocation. We just want a house just to put our kids in and to be able to have a suitable home for them to progress.
Okay. Thank you. That's been heard loud and clear.
Thank you very much.
No trouble at all. Thank you. Okay. I think there aren't any more members of the public forum this evening, so feel free to stay for the rest of the meeting, take a seat over on the back there, or feel free to go home and enjoy your evening. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item number 6, it's the action tracker and future business. This report captures actions from the last meeting on 23rd of July and highlights the progress on issues raised by the committee. We had quite a few actions from that one, quite a few questions. Do members have any comments on this? It has been circulated prior to the meeting. Councillor Cowell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It refers to what was then the agenda item number 6, and it's the 6th sort of box down. I've printed mine off, so it probably doesn't mean a lot to you guys. Page 28, I think, in the original report. It says, Councillor J. Cowell raised a question in relation to private sector housing, how many cases had involved rogue landlords and how many cases had been resolved. The Group Director, Housing and Assets, advised on the establishment of the rogue landlord group and data could be shared with the committee. But I don't say he just says a waiting response still, so I just wondered whether there was any chance we could get a response to that, please.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And obviously in this action tracker, there are a number of items that are awaiting response. So hopefully Kathy's going to tell us that will be with us very shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a rogue landlord group that meets, and I've asked for data from those, but also any further data from our private sector housing team. So I have now received that, Councillor Cowell, and I'm collating it. It'll be with you shortly, and I apologise. With it being July and August, we've had a lot of people on leave, and so they're just sending it through, and we'll get it out to you as soon as possible. Similarly, there's an action around relating to Councillor Reid, and she has sent across details now of the rogue landlord that she was referring to at the last meeting. So again, we're aware of that landlord through the rogue landlord group, and we can come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Any others? No, I would just note, Kathy, that there are a number of other items on there too that we still, yeah, if we can do, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd intended to go through them at the meeting, if I may. So the first one, if we go back to the top, was in relation to the response to member of the public who's here this evening. That has now gone out. It does say in the action notes that copies should be sent to committee members and relevant ward councillors. I don't think that's appropriate. It's relation to the case management. I don't think it would be appropriate to send that response to committee members given the personal information that's in there. But as you've heard, that response has been sent. Okay, if I move us down to page 27, the response to Councillor Reid, as we've just outlined, we've now had that information as to who the landlord is. We've cross-referenced that. It is an address or a landlord that's known to the Rogue Landlord Group. So we'll provide you with an update on that from the group. We've just touched on page 28 on the response to Councillor Cowell, where I do now have that information to circulate. And in terms of the recommendation, which is referred to on page 29 of the documents, apologies, I'm just pulling up the response to that. So in terms of the recommendation that's on page 29, I think we discussed this when we had the agenda setting meeting and agreed that we would look into what options we may be able to explore and bring a response back to a future meeting to outline what we may or may not be able to do, both within the resources that we have within the housing service, but also more widely working alongside other organisations. So the team are looking at that. And perhaps if we could look at getting that on the agenda for a later date, we can bring back anything that we've been able to look at. And finally, I think in terms of page 30, there was a question around the 1% increase in antisocial behaviour cases reported. So the head of service who manages that service area has been off. She's back in now and is working on it as we speak. So again, my apologies to committee members that we've not been able to provide that in advance of this meeting, but you should get it, I'd hope today, but certainly within the next couple of days. Now that she's back in the office, it's at the top of her agenda. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Just on that recommendation, obviously, as you said, we discussed it agenda setting, and just to clarify, obviously there was the point about future aspirations for how this could be implemented at a gold standard, but also what we can implement now with the resources we've got. So hopefully you'll be able to bring that to one of these meetings quite soon. That'll be helpful. Okay, Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, if I can comment, Mr. Chairman, on that one, we both agreed, if you remember, about the gardening issue. I think it went out, I was referring to my ward in Cornwall, but I was referring to the whole of the borough. It applies to the whole of the borough. And, you know, it's really necessary we do something. Housing manager working extremely hard to resolve these problems. They're confronted with the tenant after making several appointments and not making themselves available to discuss it. And it is a rather concerning situation. So I think we should take this situation quite seriously because as a recent survey that I carried out locally, one of the things that's highlighted exactly what we're talking about tonight is the way we let council tenants allow the garden to get in such a state, and some of them you'd be absolutely amazed what is stacked in there, going rusty for year after year after year. We need to get as many voids done. We need to get people in these houses, but we don't need the obstacle of having this obstacle of saying, oh, I'm not going to live next door to that. It is unfair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stanley. Obviously, made those points quite strongly at the last meeting too, and I know Kathy and the team are working on that. So, thank you. Okay, unless there are any other comments or anything on that one, we'll move on. So that item is noted. So now moving on to agenda item number 7. This is a main item about void properties. The committee has previously requested an update on the void properties to understand the current position of voids delivery and performance. So we'll invite officers now to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll introduce the report, and I'm sure when it comes to questions that my colleagues to my right will step in. In terms of the report itself, as you said, it was requested by the committee. It's quite a detailed report. So what I'd like to do, with your permission, Chair, is pull out the key messages from it, and then you leave as much time as possible for questions. So in sharing the report, what we're asking committee members to note is that we've made improvements in key performance metrics around voids. There will always be more to do, but I think that what you'll see in the report is the progress that's been made since the last time we discussed it at this committee. And I suppose it would be helpful as part of the comments at the end to get some feedback as to any further information, activity or assurance that the committee would feel they'd benefit from to enable effective oversight and scrutiny of our void properties. So you'll see in the background that the figures that outlines really the number of void properties we deal with in any one year, and it's always around that 1,100 to 1,200 mark. So these are properties where the tenant has moved out for whatever reason, and we have to bring them back into use to re-let. In terms of the report, you'll see again that we also reference in there disposals, which we've talked about previously at this committee. We haven't had any disposals since September of last year, but again, there will be times when it is appropriate for us to dispose of homes, and we follow the protocol and the processes that we've outlined previously. There's some information in there in terms of where we've engaged contractors, but we've done a lot to reduce our contractor spend. And again, we've reported that to this committee previously. What you'll see in terms of the current position is a reduction in the number of works in progress, the WIP, as you'll hear our officers call it, for main voids, and an increase in handovers. So that's when we hand them back to the housing team to let. And a high number of voids are now being turned around in a short period of time, including 1 week where we actually handed back I say the royal we, I've done no work in this at all, where the team handed back 47 voids in 1 week to the housing team to let. So significant improvements in terms of void turnarounds. You'll see as well as we move down I've clicked on the wrong thing. You'll see as we move down through the report in paragraph 9, where that reduction in void turnaround days has impacted. So you'll see the comparisons between 2024, 25 and this year, and you'll see a reduction, quite a significant reduction against each of our void classifications in terms of the time it takes to repair them and bring them back up to our void standard. Obviously, the positive knock-on effect of this is a reduced void loss, which I know has again been an area of concern to this committee in the past. So we've been able to turn them around faster, return them to the housing team faster, and therefore re-let them faster. So it not only does it improve our void turnaround times, reduces our void loss, it also is a better service because we have around 4,500 people at any one time on our waiting list. So the sooner we can turn those homes around, the sooner somebody can be allocated that home. The team meet weekly with the lettings team, so they're having regular conversations, and probably more so the formal meeting on a weekly basis, but also discussing daily what voids are coming back again to reduce the time period between that handover and when those can be let, so they can collaborate and share information. They know what voids are coming up when we get a notice in from a tenant. They know when voids that are being turned around and worked on are due to come back, so it's streamlined the process. You'll see in paragraph 11 that the average cost of turning around a void has also decreased. It was in 2024-25, the average cost was nearly £6,000. That decreased in the first quarter of this year and has dropped as well. So it's now less than half that amount due to the work that the team are doing, the reduction in contractor costs, etc., and also reviewing the void specifications. So essentially what we want our homes to do is to meet our rental standard. But again, we've talked about this at this committee before. We've looked at that specification to bring it in line with what other housing providers are delivering, and to make sure that we can manage our costs appropriately, turn our homes around in the shortest period of time, but still meet the standard that we would be expected to meet. So you'll see that reduction in void costs in there. There's a lot of graphs, and I know they're really, really difficult to read, but hopefully, if you can squint in at them, you can see how that performance is reflected over quite a long period of time from early 2024 onwards. There's some information in there in paragraph 13 in terms of the void categories. So that helps us to establish the expected cost. And you'll note again the reference to strategic voids. And this is where we anticipate that the void turnaround cost will be in excess of £10,000. And that's when our process around disposal will kick in. Doesn't automatically mean the property will be disposed of. It means that it requires a wider conversation between a number of teams to understand actually what will it cost. What's the return on that investment? Will this property with its rental income return that cost? Where is it? What are the characteristics of the property? Do we have demand for that property type? So that is the trigger, not the decision-making part of that. So you'll see it set out there. It goes on then in terms of paragraph 14 to describe a little bit more detail how we deal with those strategic voids and how we manage them. And that's kind of linked to what I've just described in terms of that £10,000 or more potential void turnaround cost triggering a much more robust and in-depth conversation. In paragraphs 15 and 16, you can see rent loss attributed to voids. So again, this is reducing, which is a positive, positive step. As we're turning them around more quickly, then we're reducing the amount of void money of rental money that's lost on those voids. And we've reduced the percentage. The figures are in there as well, but we've reduced the percentage of void loss down from 2.2% to 1.91%. Doesn't sound a huge amount in percentages, but it's a reasonable amount in actual pounds and pence. And you'll see that it's also broken down by area within the report. There's further in paragraph 18, some more information on contractor spend. And again, we've brought reports on this to this committee in the past, and Ian presented those. So I'm sure that if there's any questions specifically related to those, we'd be happy to take those. I could talk at length about the report, but I think probably that's given an overview, and it may be best to hand over for any questions and comments. So, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Kathy. Right, there's a few hands gone up there, so Ethan, if we could just jot the order, so I'm being fair to everybody. While we're just doing that, one question I'll start with if I can, and I'm sure it might have jumped out to others as well, is in paragraph 11, where we talk about the average cost of voids and how that's been reduced. Obviously, that presents as good news on the face of it, especially with such a significant drop from just under 6,000 to 2,451. But I think I'd be interested in maybe the committee would in hearing a bit of context around that, just to see how we've made those savings, what kind of, because obviously it's saying there that it's to meet a minimum housing standard. Well, if we were spending more before, were we exceeding the standard before? Is that why it was so expensive and now we're actually meeting? Or have we made efficiencies? If you can give a few examples just to contextualise if that is as good as it sounds or if there are downsides along with it.
Hello, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that question. Good question. Yeah. It's actually quite clearly related to the reduction in contractor spend. In previous reports that Kathy alluded to, when we started reviewing our contractor and contractor management, we identified that a significant amount of money was being spent with contractors in the void areas. We assessed the internal resources and decided that it would be better utilisation of the internal resources if we were to focus on voids rather than using contractors. As a direct result of that, the cost of the void comes down. And as Kathy alluded to as well, the standard has now been brought in line with other housing providers within the housing sector. So it is not substandard in any way, shape or form.
Okay, sounds like efficiency is leading to a savings. That does sound like good news. Thank you. Right, so I've got the list here, and this is what happens when you give the vice chair the pen. He puts himself as the next speaker. So I'll just read the order. So we've got Councillor Stafford, then we've got Councillor Reid, then we've got Councillor Cowell, and then Councillor Hussain, and obviously anybody else who'd like to contribute. Councillor Stanley, you can come after. So Councillor Stafford.
Oh, sorry.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, I thought I'd just get my question out the way first. Thank you, guys. Mine was sort of around the void properties that we've sort of disposed of. Now, I just wanted to sort of just clarify from there, because obviously in the report it says there's been sort of no disposal since September, and I believe you said that was 2024, didn't you, Kathy? Not obviously the September that we're in right now. Okay, so I'd just like to sort of ask, out the 195 properties that the council has disposed of since last April, how much income has the council actually received from that? And have we sort of spent any of that funds up to date?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stafford. I don't have the figure to hand. I know we've presented it before, so I'll circulate it to the committee. But essentially where we got to was we had a number of strategic voids that had been awaiting a decision for some time. So that's why there was quite a large number that went through at one time. I'll circulate the income generated from them. It's probably worth me just pointing out that those are capital receipts which are ring fenced to reinvest back into new homes, either through development or acquisition. So that's what they'll be spent on. So I can circulate that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Kathy. So moving on, Councillor Reid.
I've got two questions really. The first one, what is your average turnover for a void? From the time the keys are handed in to the time it's relet again?
I think it's set up.
We'll have turnaround time of days.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
basically I'm just looking at how long it takes for one void to be done and with the rent loss, and just seeing because I know Catherine reduced it before because it was quite large before when you first came. I just wanted to know what it is now.
And I suppose, and you comment on this, I remember from a couple of years ago when this was originally being talked about, the reason why the figure was such a long period was because of those long-standing voids.
Yeah.
If they've been disposed of, this number presumably came down quite significantly. So, Ian, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think in the report section 9 that sets out the answer to your query there. So the average number of calendar days to complete a standard void is now at 10.75 days.
How many?
10.75 days. It's in section 9 of the report. Yeah.
Okay. And my next question is that I understand that you've changed contractors and reduced the bill of the contractors, but when doing the voids, I know it's at a lower cost and you're going up to standards, but what we worry about as councillors and the public who are renting these properties is that when we go in there, just because the basics have been done and all the tickets have been crossed, are we going to get an increase in repairs with damp and stuff like that? Because sometimes you can go into a council property, looks immaculate because they've painted it, done this, done that, and then we get a call 6 months later that can you come down because it's riddled in damp. Yeah. So basically sometimes cheap is not always best. Yeah.
There is a process in place where any reports captured within the first 6 months are picked up by the voids team, and we've got that data. Obviously, unfortunately, we've not included it in the report, but we can include it in future reports so you can see that volume. We just don't have that information to hand, but it's a fair point, a fair question. In future updates, we'll provide that information. No problem.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. Next questions from Councillor Cowan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got 4 just quick points, really. The first one, a lot of it's been covered by yourself and Councillor Reid, to be honest, in terms of the void costs. But one question I think I would like to ask around this local authority rental standard. It's an issue that I've raised before. We're acquiring a lot of these new builds. Down the line, will we be able to maintain those to the existing standard, as it were, tying up with the local authority rental standard? Are we going to be able to fit those extra sort of posh, for want of a better description, fixtures and fittings within those lower costs and the LA rental standard, because that seems to be way above that?
Councillor Bevan, I think, wants to respond on that. Ian, then if you've got something to add.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure the same question would have been asked in the 1950s when we put up multi-storey blocks across the West Midlands in the wake of post-war and pre-war housing that would have been prevalent in those times. And I'm sure questions would have been asked of a similar thing then. How on earth are we going to maintain these at this standard? I am sure there is a far more technical answer, and that's you, Ian.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. An interesting point, yeah, one we've discussed before. In no way are we going to degrade the properties that we purchased by obviously lowering the standard in any way, shape or form, and we will continue to utilise the materials that we've got and that we utilise on our existing stock, which I think we've had this conversation before, are not Rolls-Royce parts. Probably better to class them as Mercedes rather than Rolls-Royce. That's one of the ways that we've generated savings. But the components that we use in the voids are not substandard and won't be moving forward.
Okay, Councillor Cowell. I know you said you've got 4 points. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. The second one goes back to these number of properties that have been disposed of, the sort of 195 and the 40 that we're looking at. I mean, it may not be disposed of, but there's a consideration around that. One of the issues for me, I think, is around the 10k threshold. Is there a case for arguing that that should be higher? I admit that not everything's disposed of at 10k, but it does bring that into the equation. And as we've seen here tonight, there are a number of people wanting properties. So, you know, disposals are a bit of a hot topic. Is there any way that we could consider raising that topic or raising that level, that threshold?
Councillor Bevan, I know, has indicated he'd like to speak. So Councillor Bevan, and then Ian, if you wanted to speak as well. And to yourself. There you go.
Excellent. I've forgotten what the question was now with all the flashing lights and come over all funny. There has to be a figure somewhere. I think Councillor Cowell, doesn't there? And I think at £10,000, that is a significant amount of money when you look at what we're currently spending on voids and how that figure has dropped. You could argue that at £10,000, that's 4 times the usual spend, and I think we should certainly be getting involved at that point. When the void spend was £7,000, £5,000, £7,000, £8,000, then 10,000 I don't think would have been enough of a cushion. I'd be interested in your opinion on what you think that trigger point should be. But Chair, just as on the previous question, I'm sure Ian has a technical answer as well.
Thank you. Yeah, 10,000 is the norm, which triggers it. So majority of landlords.
Yeah, I don't know if the microphone's not close to people. I couldn't hear that.
Sorry,
other members probably couldn't hear.
10,000 is the sector norm, which is the use for a trigger across both housing associations and council-owned homes. So.
Well, I know Councillor Cowell's got a few points, so we'll come to you next, Councillor Reid, if that's okay.
Well, just quickly.
Oh, sorry. Just on that, in case it helps with your follow-up, Cathy did want to speak. Sorry, Cathy, you did signal. I forgot.
It's just a reminder because I wouldn't be me in this meeting if I didn't say this. But of course, the 10K is a trigger for a consideration as to whether we dispose or not. And just with reference to the families, you know, that are in the public area listening to this, we take into account obviously demand as well. And whilst we've got two households here who are actually in need of bigger properties, around 70% of our waiting list are waiting for 1 and 2 beds, and it would be remiss of me not to remind that. So we do have to take all of that into account when we're disposing, whether the threshold be 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. It's just a really small part of that consideration. It's just a trigger for conversation. It's really important that we stress that it's not an absolute, we'll dispose of it for that amount. Thank you.
Okay.
Just coming back quickly on that, while I accept that and I fully understand that, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you could spend considerably more than that to keep the property within our stock and still in that moment spend less than you would to purchase a property. So there's that sort of balance between an existing property and sort of purchasing a replacement, which perhaps ought to be part of the equation as well. So I'm just thinking, you know, just to be difficult as I usually am, I just throw that one out. The other questions are relatively quick, Chair. I can probably lump them to one. I just wondered, paragraph 9, it refers to the void transfer panel. I just wondered sort of who sits on that, how it operates, sort of just a bit more detail. Paragraph 14, it refers to HMT. I don't know whether that's a housing management team or what it might be. It's another one of those. And paragraph 15, again, it's something I've raised before. We often look at void loss in terms of rent loss. But again, the housing revenue account has to pay the general fund council tax, and it's something that we don't tend to see in the figures, but it'd be interesting to know. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Would like to take that one? Councillor Bevan? Somebody's microphone, is it on? No, there we go.
You'd have thought I'd have got the hang of it by now, wouldn't you? I just want to come back on Councillor Cowell's first point, Chair, if that's okay. It's a sticky equation, isn't it? We need to have a trigger point at which we consider what's going to happen to that property. But as Cathy said, we also then have to look at what's the demand for this property, and then we have to weigh all those up together. And I don't think that's really reflected in the wording in there. I think when we put a figure of £10,000 in there, it quite rightly generates the questions that we've received tonight. But what it doesn't then do, Chair, is look at the softer issues. Is there a demand for that property? Is it really worth spending £60,000 on that property if there isn't a demand? And it's difficult to try and put that in a graph, but it is things that we do take into account. £10,000 is just a financial trigger, which will trigger another part of the process, which will include a look at, if you like, the softer issues such as demand, type, area, location, anything that that you want to put there.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bevan. I think that was obviously on the previous point. So on the last point that Councillor Cowell made, which, does anybody need a reminder of what it was? Yeah, it looks like Ian remembered.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
okay.
HMT stands for housing maintenance. And then the makeup for the transfer panel is for the heads of service within the housing directorate.
Okay, does that answer the question, Councillor Cowell? Bonnie, if you can
Council
a quick
tax.
reminder of what it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
If-
sorry.
consideration of council tax in void loss as well.
Yeah, we can provide those figures. Apologies, we can put them in for future and send them to the panel.
Okay, thank you. Just before, Councillor Reid, was your point on the points that have just been raised, or was it separate? Microphone, please, if you can.
With the voids is, when do we actually, because we've got voids in Dudley, property in Dudley that are quite a few years old. When do we consider what age has the property got to be before we consider disposing of them? And what type of condition does it have to be before you say enough is enough? We've got to move on, sell this and move on and get adequate accommodation, or put that towards building new properties, adequate properties, because you can have one you've had like that's 100 years old or 80 years old. Obviously it's wear and tear. I had tenants from the last tenants meeting, and they're asking me to ask you, what is the lifespan of their kitchen in the flats? They want to know when do you change them? What are the timescales? What are the timescales for the windows and things? Well, mainly I want to know that how long do you keep that property before you say this is old now, we need to move on?
Presumably, this is a how long's a piece of string, and every case is different, and it actually touches back on the point that was made earlier, that you need to get past the trigger of 10,000, then all these other factors are considered. Presumably that's along the lines of the position, but Councillor Bevan, you want to come back on that one?
Me again.
Yeah, I'll just say that to everybody. When you've made your point, if you could remember to switch your microphone off as well, and then hopefully that will keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You're quite right. How long is a piece of string? The only trigger that we have is the £10,000, and then all those other things will be taken into account. There won't be a point where a property is 100 years old, therefore it needs to go. But these things that you refer to, how long should a kitchen last? There is a technical answer for this that Ian may come in on. All the components in the property have an estimated life, and that will include kitchens, boilers, roofs, and probably 20 other items, which I'm sure Ian can just give a brief rundown on. But yeah, that would fall into what I called soft issues.
Yeah, okay. Feel free to give some detail, and I think actually the point has been answered. But if you've got any useful information to add, Ian, thank you.
So that the lifespan for each of the components that we use are the lifespans that are recommended by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, again, which is a sector norm. In a future report update, we can provide a list of what those are for you, so that you've got that information. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Button, please.
Sorry about that. It was the residents' meeting at Clenclawton Cavalier Court. They want to know when can they have a new kitchen? Because somebody's been there 30 years and she wants to know if she can have a new kitchen.
Okay, thank you. We have got a couple more speakers, so I'll come on to him in just a sec. But just before we move past, because I thought Councillor Cowell touched on an important point earlier about, well, it triggered a question in my mind, which is what's the council's policy in terms of does a disposal, is it 1 for 1 where we then look to acquire a property? So if we dispose of 10, are we looking to acquire 10? Or have we got a 1 for 1 or a ratio approach or anything like that? Because then I suppose that would be easier to weigh one against the other, that if a void would cost £26,000 to bring back into use, but to replace it with the 1 for 1 approach, if that's the policy, we'd be plugging a gap of 50,000. Then obviously there'd be a big, it would be easy to weigh one against the other, if I've made the point there. Yeah. Thank you. Kathy?
Again, it's not a simple, straightforward answer. So it goes back to the point about when we're looking to replace and when we're looking to use the capital receipts from disposals to build or acquire properties, we're building them based on the demand on our housing register. So that could mean that it's a different sized property in a different area. So the property price will vary because it may be a smaller property, it may be a more expensive area. So it's not as simple as yes or no. We would always try to replace as much of the stock that we've disposed of as possible, but it's a bit like right to buy receipts really, which were always intended to be a 1 for 1, and it's really difficult to achieve that. And I think what we need to probably be clear on is we may have some properties that actually we could invest 20 or 30,000 in, and that would be cheaper than buying a new build property. But it doesn't change the fact that that 30,000 makes it lettable. It's still 70 years old. So things are going to continue to go wrong. So I think we have to balance out as well that, yes, it may be proportionately a little bit more expensive to buy a new build, but we've got another 70 years or more of life out of that property rather than another 10 or 15 out of the one that we've invested in. So we'll always try and replace as many as we can, but they may be different sizes, different prices, and they will always, significantly add to the lifespan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid, now we have got Councillor Hussain and Councillor Stanley have been waiting patiently. If you've got a quick one to come back on.
Kathy, that's exactly what I was trying to say, because if you've got a void and it's like 70, 80 years old, you've got that much repairs, 30 grand repairs, why would you repair that? You'd rather have something that's going to last you longer.
Yeah, and I think the point is that it's not an automatic thing. Just because property is 70 years old, it's not. Okay. But it is a factor in as part of the formula, if you like, for when that's worked out. So, yep, okay, that's great. So, Councillor Hussain, and then we'll come to Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of points, but first of all, can I welcome this report? It's a very positive report, and it's a right direction of travel. So we're moving in the right direction. Just to start with some technicalities, on page 35, when you're working out how many voids you've actually successfully relet, are you taking out of the equation the ones which you sell off, so they don't feature in the equation on working out? So that is a yes. Thank you. On page 37, Chairman, average days lost. This is page 37, paragraph 8. There is a peak between, or it starts peaking between June and August, and the explanation is that because of the annual leave and so on. Don't we actually manage the leave and make sure that the appropriate staff are there to actually carry out what they need to do?
Yeah, okay, 2 questions there. Who'd like to pick those up? Ian?
It's a fair point in terms of management of leave. Obviously, we do try our best to ensure that leave is smoothed out throughout the year, but within the summer months, the majority of people with children say that they leave until that time, so it is really difficult to manage. Now, we have identified that spike and used it to help form part of our plans for the future of how we manage the service. Previously, we've touched on the fact that we've disengaged contractors because of the cost associated with them. We now re-engaged a new contractor to assist with smoothing out those peaks and troughs, so we've got cover.
Thank you. On page, on paragraph 9 again, Chairman, on the streamlining voids process and shifting repairs responsibilities. I know it's a bit more detail, but is it possible to get just some idea of what sort of things you have done to streamline the voids process?
Yeah, okay, we'll pass that back to Ian. Ian, if you could just pull the mic a bit closer to you. I don't know if it just seemed to struggle to hear slightly. I don't know if other members are as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, of course. One of the things that we noticed when we started was that, again, I think I touched on it before, we offered a very comprehensive Rolls-Royce service for our repairs service. So we set to work on bringing the standard, or not the standard, but the service in line with the sector norm. There's a document that's posted on the website called the Repair Responsibilities, which sets out clearly the definition of what landlord is expected to do and what a tenant is expected to do. So we've looked to apply that same logic to the void standard. But it probably should be noted, there are, in exceptional circumstances, we will go above and beyond when needed to help incoming customers.
Okay. Councillor Sain, just your microphone if you can. Thank you.
And I praise the process involved in paragraph 10, allocation and lettings working together to actually produce. So that's a good process to have. On page 39, Chairman, can I just talk about the strategic void? These are the properties we let go. £10,000 limit. I think if we consider the cost of materials, which have actually increased disproportionately, so we hear over the years, so £10,000 in the scheme of things then becomes a very small amount to actually bring the property up to scratch. That's one. And the second one was, right, on your explanation that the pricing is set against the National Federation rates. My understanding of all these is that the costing in there are very steep. So does that reflect the local market compared to the National Federation?
Couple of questions there. Ian, did you want to pick those up? Councillor
Yes.
Sain, if you could just knock your mic on.
Yeah, sorry, I do
Thank
apologise.
you.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh, still not gone off. Sticky button. There we go.
So we look to implement a schedule of rates referred to as NatFed 7. NatFed 7, again, is probably the most used schedule of rates within the housing sector. For most of the frameworks and contracts that we go out to now, they all refer to NatFed 7 as being like the base mark. Now, the document, if you can imagine, is basically a list of all the different repairs that are carried out, and it gives a base price for it. Now, depending on the volume of work that you're issuing and the area that you live in, there'll be an uplift or a downlift on that baseline, which is reflective of the pressures in the local area and the capacity issues and the availability of materials at what price as well. So that's all factored into the price. So the price will vary depending on where you go. To go back to your point is the price that will be paid in the Dudley area will be reflective of what contractors cost in that area.
So above board.
It seems that way.
Thank you. So it's good to hear that we do take local considerations into account. On page 42, just a quick point on if the expenditure on the contractors have gone down just over, it was nearly £4 million to 141,098. That's a considerable drop in that. Does that mean that we stopped using the contractors and employed local labour to actually, local authority employees to actually carry out the repairs, or what does that mean in real terms?
I think I touched on it before. We redesignated internal staff from operatives from other work streams to focus on the voids.
Oh, just press the button if you can.
Sorry, yeah, just to be clear, when we started assessing the number of operatives that we had available within the council, through implementing better working processes, we were able to increase productivity. Therefore, there was surplus within the repair service. That surplus staff was then directed to the void service, which then led to obviously a reduction in the reliance on contractors to carry out void works, to the sum of, like what you pointed out there, £4 million, £4 million, excuse me.
It's a big.
Yeah, microphone again. Sorry. Feel like a broken record right now. We'll get you a new mic next time.
And finally, Chairman, as I said, this is a very positive report on the council plan, paragraph 26. And it talks about the recommendations for 25, 26. Can I also add one as well to actually, I don't know how you're going to word it, but to actually robustly monitor the external contractors to make sure that their pricing and quality of work is in line with what we want. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. Thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll come on to recommendations at the end. I think Steve's made a quick note of that, and we can run that past the committee at the end. But moving on to Councillor Stanley, who's been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in the report, it refers to the fact that I asked about figures rather than percentages. It certainly has made a big difference, and I do thank the Housing Department for more transparency that we were getting in the past. At least we've got transparency now, where we lacked it in the past by a small percentage. Didn't seem a lot. Members took it as, oh, that isn't a lot, 2%. But now it's more transparent from the Housing Department. That is a good step forward. Looking at the work that's been done, this, I would say, is contributed to our workforce who have worked extremely hard to achieve these figures. And I think some message should be sent back to those people and thanking them for getting the voids turned over much quicker than what we are currently. It just happened overnight, but at least they've worked hard to achieve it. But the thing is, if you look at page 38 and look at the comparison, what we're losing on voids, it's dropped from 3 months to 2 months, from a week, from 2 months to a fortnight, whatever the case may be. Those are good figures to achieve. I'm very grateful for those. And as I say, for the transparency we seem to be now getting. The question I have, because I've got to ask a question somewhere along the line, haven't I, Mr. Chairman, otherwise I'll be told off, is when we look at the paragraph 15 on page 41, we're referring to the loss at the end of Q1, which is £500,000. There's 4 quarters in the year. Could have a broad forecast of what that will be on the 4th quarter of void loss, please? That's the question.
Okay. A very questiony question there. Who wants to pick that up? Ian?
I think to answer that final point about the forecast for Q4, we can take that question away and provide that more detailed information that's responsive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to accept that, haven't I?
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Has anybody else got any questions on this item? No? So there was, obviously we've got, and this is where I wish I got paper rather than a screen. We've got the recommendations on page 45. There's also the suggestion from Councillor Hussain of an additional recommendation that officers. Actually, Councillor Hussain, do you want to remind us of what your recommendation was?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to robustly manage the contractors and make sure, you know, that the quality and the financial things are in line.
Yeah. Okay. So more of an assurance.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So are we all happy for the wording to be Steve to work on some wording for that? Yeah. Great. And then I think actually there is the point there about just noting, asking that thanks be noted to the team who've worked on improving the picture with voids. So if we can, I don't know if it's a recommendation or more something that we want to be noted and passed on to the staff. So again, we'll get the wording of that and the thanks of the committee passed on. Okay, so moving on to the next item, which is agenda item number 8, building safety and compliance arrangements, domestic and corporate. This is pages 46 to 56 of the report. Can I invite officers to present the report, and members can obviously keep any questions again till the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to obviously go through the report verbatim, but I'll just give you an outline of the report. To outline the current and emerging legislation, regulation, guidance around building safety and compliance. It's the purpose of the report, along with to provide free scrutiny opportunity for arrangements being developed by the newly formed Housing and Assets Group, and to update the council on its compliance status with building safety and the Decent Home Standard. One of the weaknesses that was identified as part of the investigation that followed the self-referral to the regulation was that there was insufficient transparency around our compliance arrangements and compliance figures. The recommendation was that this report be brought to this scrutiny panel along with the other governing bodies within the council on a 6-monthly basis. In January of this year, there was a report that went into more detail about the background of the issues and what got us in this position, but I thought it wise just to include a summary of obviously what put us in the position with the regulators to start with, which was incomplete data on decent homes, overdue gas safety inspection, outstanding fire risk assessments, electrical safety gaps, and overdue asbestos inspections. In the report, it sets out obviously what our position is today in comparison to the January update. With the strategic response being that obviously we are implementing a new operating model to centralise asset management, the formation of a housing and assets group with a senior management restructure, the development of new KPIs, and the request for scrutiny committee to input into what they would like those KPIs to be. The expansion of the compliance recovery programme, which will now include corporate landlord services, and the integration of compliance systems C365 and governance structures to help improve the current position with compliance on CLS. I think that summarises the report, and I'm happy to take any queries or questions you've got on the content.
Thank you, Ian. So we'll open up to questions now. Councillor Stanley, signal first, and then Councillor Henley, then Councillor Sane, and then anybody else.
Mr. Chairman, on this occasion, my question going to be quite simple and hopefully very easy. Are we still complying with the 2010 Decent Home Standards? Because if we are, that will cut down a lot of this money on voids. If we've got the work done, the kitchens and bathrooms, that will be a great asset. If it is being done and being abused, that's a different matter. But are we up to the Decent Home Standards of 2010?
Ian?
I think probably the best way to answer that question is every effort is being made to ensure that we fully comply across 100% of the stock. As is set out in the report, we've not been able to get access to carry out stock condition survey on every single property, but we did get into a high number as part of the stock condition programme. Based on that information, it's been reported obviously what our current non-decency rate is, and we have plans in place to address. There's a plan in place now where we can forecast what our non-decency rate is going to be over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. There are plans in place to address that. When we became aware of that information, circa 12 months ago, we started a procurement process to bring on board a large contractor to carry out a large volume of planned works, such as kitchens and such of the components that we sometimes pick up in voids, but your point is correct. Once that contract kicks off and starts to deliver, like I said, large volumes, it will actually further reduce the works that are required as part of the void process.
Councillor Stanley, are you happy with that? Have you got a follow-up?
Oh, it is now. Whether we are or we're not complying to it and where we are with it, because that is very important in respect of it is an obligation this authority has to carry out with all due respects. So I would safely hope you would say to me that all bathrooms and kitchens have been either in 30 years or 40 years, that work has been carried out. And we haven't got an awful lot outstanding from the time I'm referring to. So we should be compliant with it. And this simple question was, are we or aren't we?
Again, it's a complex answer. It's not as simple as just a yes or no. To give the scrutiny panel assurance, everything that can be done is being done. Until we get full access to all 100% stock, we can't stay here and confirm that we are fully compliant. On the properties that we have got access to, we are compliant. We're aware of the information and the works that are required to keep it compliant over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Like I said, there's a contractor being put in place to address those forecasted future risk areas.
Okay, I can see that Kathy also wants to respond to that point.
Yeah, just to add really to what Ian said, and in terms of your specific question, Councillor Stanley, Ian's described in detail all the things we have to go through. It's not a yes and no answer, but currently our non-decency levels, so the percentage of properties that don't meet the decent home standard, is around 4%. That will fluctuate because there's I think about 21 measures, isn't there, in the decent home standard, and so a property that could be classed as decent today may be non-decent tomorrow because, for example, something's changed in their kitchen or bathroom. But at the current time, it's around 4% that are non-decent, but we're aware of what those are, and as Ian said, we're putting in place the arrangements to deal with them.
Please, if you can press your button now, please. Not yet. No.
Is now. Just put it on.
It is.
Yeah. The reason I asked the question is quite simple, and that is going back historically years on the old housing committee. One of the things we did many mods and probably reduced a lot of properties from 3-bedroom to 2-bedroom, etc., etc. And what we found, a lot of refusals, and that's where I was having the searching question. Are we prepared to carry out this week, but tenants are refusing to have the work carried out? That was really what I was heading for.
I imagine that might be part of it because I think Ian mentioned that we haven't been able to get into all properties. If you could actually just point us to the page in the report where that information is, and then perhaps other members can just have a scan over that as well, if you happen to know where it is.
Yeah, of course. So it's in section 15, which is on
That's right, yep.
committee reports. It's page 52. Page 52, yeah. So we were unfortunately unable to get into 3,867 properties, which is a no access issue or refusal issue, as you refer to. We continue and will continue to try to gain access to those properties so that we've got that full comprehensive picture that I mentioned before. But it does further support the point I made that actually it's really difficult for us to come here and say yes or no, we're compliant because of the number of properties that we were unable to get into.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, sorry, I should have said this before. This isn't unusual. It's not peculiar to Dudley. So as I'd said, our current non-decency levels are around 4%. I think the average actually, when we look at benchmarking, is around 8%. So whilst we would want all of our homes to be decent, there's a recognition that that's a real challenge, not least because just by a date change, a component could change that could take us out of decency. But to put it into context, it's not peculiar to Dudley to have some homes at any time that aren't decent. Oh, no, I shouldn't have said that. It's not that they're not decent. The decent home standard is a very specific standard. They still may be perfectly fine, but it may be that they've got a component that's over a certain age or two things together that make them non-decent for the purposes of the decent home standard. That doesn't mean they're not decent to live in.
Okay, thank you. I'll add Councillor Reid because we have got quite a list of people wanting to speak, but on that specifically, and just noting paragraph 15 on page 52 then, that is a really high number that we haven't been able to access, you know, when you're talking in the thousands there. So I can see that we've recruited additional resource to help with this, but presumably we're aiming for 100%. But that will be hard to reach. So when do we hope to be able to really make progress on getting into that 3,867 homes?
We've put in place now a programme, a rolling programme of stock condition surveys where we aim to access 20% every year and every year thereafter. So every 5 years, you've got a fresh set of data. It is difficult to, again, just to confirm, you can't get into 100% of properties, but we do have now dedicated teams internally focusing on repeated door knocking and making a number of efforts to try and get into those properties that we'll struggle to get into. And actually, 82% the access stock, the stock condition surveys got into is probably around the industry norm. Refusals and no access is quite a high or a major issue, not just to Dudley, but actually across the entire housing sector.
Okay. There is a point now that even if we do have an approach where we're trying to get around a fifth of all the properties each year, we need to make sure that because we can hit 20% and it can be the same 20% or move from one 20% to the next 20%, but you might always be missing the same 20%. So that 3,867, we can't go on missing those infinitum. We need to get in those properties at some point on a fifth each year. Presumably it needs to be within a 5-year period. What will the approach of the council be if within that 5-year rotation we haven't been able to get in those properties?
So you can see from the chart set out in 15 that so far we've gained access to 1,253 of those initial 3,867. It's not really an issue that we can take legal access or legal access proceedings against. We do have a process called cloning, which is not something that we want to do. We'd rather have 100% accurate information, but based on the information we've got from like the next door neighbour's property type, etc., we can clone the data and forecast when the information is required.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, because if we aren't able to get access to a number of these properties, what approaches are we taking to give assurance to the council that these properties are safe? Now, obviously, there is an obligation on the tenant to let the council in, a strong obligation on the tenant, and if we're making every effort, as it seems we are, but I'm just wondering how we get that ultimate assurance if, for example, after 5 years, we haven't been able to get in a property. What do we do?
So we put in place a process where we start to engage our colleagues in the housing, to assist with gaining access, because normally what we find is where there's a no access issue, it's linked to other possible tenancy issues that need to be investigated. So working closely with colleagues in housing, we do have like a focus on gaining access. To go back to your point about providing assurance, until we get into behind that door, we can't give you 100% assurance, which is a sad position. But obviously, like I said, there are more steps now being taken than was previously to gain access to those properties.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, again, I think just to follow on from what Ian said, I think it's important to, and Ian's flagged it, that those numbers are coming down all the time. I think also with reference to the 5-year rolling programme of 20% of homes every year, historically the norm has been that you do your stock condition survey once every 10 years. So we're striving for best practice to actually get that information and update it every 5 years rather than 10 years. And I think as well, again, this is not a peculiar issue to Dudley in terms of no access. We see, and if you look at regulatory judgments that have been issued more recently, they will tell you that there's a significant number of housing providers and local authorities who do not have the data on their stock condition, whose stock condition surveys are way over the 10 years. So we're striving for that good practice performance to get that data refreshed every 5 years, but we recognise there will be some people who won't let us in. They're generally the same ones who don't let us in to do their gas safety checks, to do their electrical checks, to do any improvements to their homes. So there is a core group of people who cause us an issue. And whilst we can use legal processes to gain access to do the gas safety checks, we cannot tag on a stock condition survey as part of that access, unfortunately. So it does pose a problem for us. And I suppose it was a bit of a plea to all our ward members to support us in this and to really promote and push for local residents to let us in, and the importance of us letting us in. Thank you.
On the back of that, I wonder, and I know Ian wants to come back. On the back of that, I wonder if it'd be appropriate and helpful to have a ward breakdown of how many properties are outstanding for these stock condition surveys, and that way we can maybe try and identify other factors, or if we've got voluntary sector partners who those tenants likely engage with in other fora, that we can try a different approach to getting these properties. It just strikes me that that is a high number. Clearly, there's a big effort being made to get in these properties and some progress being made. Also, it's clearly a national issue, so it's not a Dudley issue, but it is concerning that such a high number of properties we are still outstanding. So if we could have a ward breakdown, I think that might be helpful. Ian? Mine can be.
Excellent. Two things. I think one thing that struck me during this conversation is that perhaps a conversation with colleagues in Kappa about whether we put something out on there about the importance of these checks and allowing us to get in there and have a look. So that's certainly something that I'll follow up on. But I just want to go back to the figures because we're all concentrating on the high number, and I just want to just put it into a bit more context. I'm not for 1 minute, Chair, suggesting that this isn't a problem and that the figures are low and that we should forget it. But if we look at the column on section 15, it tells us that post Savills we had 3,867 surveys outstanding. From that, we've done 1,253 internally, which leaves us with 2,614. Of those, we've actively pursued 1,136. We're on this. We are absolutely on this, but it is a huge task. It is fraught with legalities and all kinds of issues. But I just thought it was worth just reminding the committee that it's not 3,867. It's come down. Is it where I want it to be? No, but this is a huge job, and all credit to the team internally for bringing it to where it is. But we've still got to keep pushing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Bevan. It's clear that an effort is being made here, so we will note that, and we'll look forward to that ward breakdown and any extra opportunities that were identified from that. So moving on to the list we've got waiting. So Councillor Henley, then it's Councillor Hussain, Councillor Cowell, Councillor Cook and Councillor Reid. So Councillor Henley.
Cheers, Chair. Part of the first questions kind of been answered anyway. The ECIs are electrical tests. Are they for all properties? Are they for communal areas, low rise, high rise? Have you got a breakdown of that? Also, you said about the remedial work. What grading are them on the C chart? Are they 1s, 2s, 3s? And are they getting fixed as quick as possible, i.e. 1s and 2s, which 1s shouldn't be left anyway? And have you got any figures to say what we're waiting on them C charts?
Ian?
So 2 or 3 points there you raised there. In future updates, I can provide that next level of detail down. What I will point out there, you can see in the table there, it is broken down to domestic and communal. So on electrical, in July, we had 99.42% of our properties had an in-date electrical installation condition report, and 95.41% of our communal areas did. So I think the information you requested is there. To go back to the other technical point, all C1s and C2s are completed on site when they carry out the testing, and C3s are recommendations that are captured in future rewire programs.
On the FRAs, I'm just trying to get the question off it now. Why is the contract elapsed? Are you sticking with the contractor, looking for another one? And what FRAs need doing? The high rise, low rise, and what's the figures on them?
I suppose it's important to understand the context behind this issue. We have, successfully gained access to 100% of all properties that actually require an FRA. Of the 12% that are shown negative in this report, we actually carried out the FRA. The FRA was completed by the competent person, following the normal policy, following the normal format, by the competent person. The actions were taken from that FRA and the actions were acted upon. So technically we could report a position of 100%, but we weren't comfortable reporting that because the company, the outgoing company, the contract was novated from contractor 1 to contractor 2. And in that period of novation, the accreditation for the company, not the actual FRA assessors, lapsed, which left us in a position where we had 148, if my memory serves, 151, excuse me, that we have now sent back for revalidation by an the new company who has got all the correct and appropriate accreditations. Interestingly enough, the contractor 1 and contractor 2 are sister companies anyway and are owned by the same parent company. So.
I know Councillor Bevan wants to come back before we move on to the next question.
That's also at the contractor's expense. It hasn't cost us anything.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Councillor Henley?
I've lost what I was doing now. It's gone.
Don't worry, we can come back
I'll
to
come.
it. Give me a nod if it comes back to you and we'll slot you back in. Okay, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you. Just to comment on Councillor Stanley's question. I think we had a presentation last year from the housing team to talk about the regulator's involvement and what he's going to measure over the number of years. So that would cover, you know, how many houses or percentage of houses in a decent are decent and or need improving. So that's part of the regulator's engagement with us. Just on a question on the table 50, Chairman, can I just, I think this is again a good news item where most of the stuff is covered. Only one asbestos is an issue at the moment, because on page 49, paragraph 6.5, we're supposed to investigate around 500 communal asbestos inspections, but that is a very low percentage. Any reasons behind that?
Ian?
Of course, yeah. So if I take you back to in section 5 there, it relates to communal asbestos inspections. Now, if I take you back to the graph which sets out the current position on, was it below? Sorry, excuse me. Here it is, the graph on page 50. If you look at the asbestos position for communal inspections, it's 100% now. So there's a low figure there for domestic, which is 43.27%. It's not a regulatory requirement that we collect that information, but we just collate it as best practice. The regulation notice relates to the communal inspections,
right?
Where there was circa 500 that were out of date. We're now at 100%.
I was reading the table wrong, Chairman. Thanks for the clarity. Just coming back onto page 53 on paragraph 17, finance. You say because of the delays or in carrying out the compliance, eventually when you're done, it is cost neutral. I would slightly disagree with that, because the time, the stuff carried out timely would cost X pounds, but if it's delayed, the cost would increase. So it's not cost neutral. I think there will be cost added to that. On page 55, this is another good one. It actually sits with the council plan, and you detailed everything against that. So that's very good, Chairman, for us to actually know where we are with regards to the council plan. Otherwise, it's a very good report, Chair.
Okay. I think there's mainly comments there, but anything any of you wanted to go back on? No? No? Okay. Councillor Henley remembered his point. Hopefully he's held on to it. Yeah.
Just a quick one on the FRAs. Who actually dictates what the property for the FRA? So like some blocks have got 2 entrances, and sometimes that might be split into 2 FRAs, or it might be covered with 1. Who says that? Ourselves or the company? If it's ourselves, sometimes isn't it easier to do the 2 entrances as 1 FRA to save a few quid?
I think I did, yeah. So one of the issues that was identified was that we had a low level of confidence in the data that we use on our stock. There's a big piece of work undertaken to clarify and validate that the information we've got on our stock is correct in terms of the property type, etc., etc. Using that information in the guidance set out in the FSO, that actually dictates what buildings require an FRA. We currently have, forgive me, I should know this number off the top of my head, I think it's 1,300 properties that require an FRA, but there are circa 600 properties that fall under the FSO that we have to go and inspect and confirm that they don't require an FRA because the communal area is outside. So there's quite a big piece of work gone through. So all the properties that fall under the FSO, we go inspect just to confirm that they don't need an FRA, or if they do, like for what you've just said then, and we identify an anomaly, we follow the FSO guidance on what it requires an FRA. That is then confirmed by a fire safety specialist that we use and utilise that's working with us to confirm that we're fully compliant with the requirements.
Yeah. All I was trying to get at there is some of them, some properties are under the same name, and it be numbers 1 to 12, 2 to 24, or whatever it is. Sometimes they'll be done as, like say, one FRA, even though they're two semi-detached properties. Sometimes they'll be done as one or two. And I'm just thinking, are we missing a trick sometimes where them being done as two and we're being charged for two by the company, where we could put it under one umbrella and get, because it's one block.
Again, I think it just goes back to the point of starting off by making, is that we've gone to great lengths to confirm and validate that our stock information is correct, and the properties that do require an FRA have an FRA carried out on them. So there's no duplication, and we are paying the correct and appropriate amount.
I think no, I don't think he's on about duplication. I think he's saying that Councillor Henley's saying that if we could do it in a strategic way, where instead of assessing number 7 on the first week of a month and then the adjacent property at number 9, no. So this is coming from a former fireman. So there's the knowledge there that is shaping the question. I think
some blocks come under one name, and it's the left hand side as you look at it. 1 to 12 is under that name. 2 to 24. But some companies will do a fire risk assessment. Well, do 2 risk assessments, so they'll do both sides. Or sometimes they'll do 1 risk assessment for the two blocks under one umbrella, so you get charged once. And I'm not going to name sources, but I am aware that we've been charged, well, we get charged both sides, some for singles, where there's 2 semi-detached properties, and sometimes we get charged twice in the past. I don't know if that's still happening, but in the past. And I'm just thinking, does that need reviewing? And probably, if it hasn't already been done so.
Before Ian comes back, Councillor Bevan and Kathy both want to come back on that.
Thank you, Chair. As you point out, Councillor Henley is former fire service, and I think his views are extremely important. Is there an example? Can you give us a block where this is maybe the case? Okay. When it comes to you about 3 a.m. this morning, okay, just do us a WhatsApp or something. If there's an example of this, then that might help, because I think I know what Councillor Henley is referring to, and I'm just thinking an example address might help. But Kathy might shed some more light on this now.
No, I see a shake of the head there.
Probably not.
That it wasn't just me.
I think I was going to ask something similar, because I think I just wanted to make the point that FRAs are only required in the communal areas. So most of the situations you're describing, where we've got numbers 1 to 12 and 13 to 24, they'll be on either side of a single communal area. So it would only be that communal, and there may be some peculiarities. And obviously, if there's semi-detached properties without a communal area, or as Ian has described, the communal area is up the outside, the staircase by way of example, they wouldn't require an FRA at all. So any example you could give us would be really helpful. We'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, say some properties are split. They've got 2 final exit doors and a single staircase, but they come under the same name, but different property addresses. So they get away with doing 2 FRAs for that communal area. But sometimes they'll do 1, but there's 2 final exits, and we get in charge either once or twice.
Clearly some really good knowledge insight there. So yeah, if we can do what Councillor Bevan suggested, if you shape a bit of information, put it together in an email, possibly send it to Ian and Councillor Bevan, and I'm sure they'll look into that. So, okay, brilliant, thank you. Moving on to, yeah, 3 a.m, that's it, yeah. So, Councillor Cowell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Some of what I was going to ask has been covered, so just a couple of quick points. Reference paragraph 8 and the smoke alarms being checked with the gas safety inspections. Just wondered what we did when people don't have gas central heating. That's the first point. And the final point goes back to Savills really, and around the EPC certificates. I just wondered how accurate these could be when Savills actually only spent a very small amount of time in each property, literally a matter of minutes. I'm just wondering about the accuracy and the level of detail.
Ian?
Yeah, of course, yeah. The first question obviously was about the smokes. Yeah, so the smokes are tested by the gas contractor when they go out to do the annual gas safety inspection. So there's normally a link between the two of them. We are putting in place now a program of inspections to check that there's no gas at a property, or to confirm that at that inspection, then we will also be picking up the smoke tests. Yeah. Then the second point about Savills, I'm going to have to take that away, the query, and come back to you as a response on that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've got to be happy with it because you've got to come back to you. But yeah, if you can make sure you do go back to Councillor Cowell on that then. Councillor Cowell, any follow-ups?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Chair.
thank you. Councillor Cook.
Chair. On page 50, it says communal electrical was at 95.41%. How many of those have to be retested because of heat damage or something else being identified in other reports?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question? Forgive me.
So in July 2025, it says in communal areas, the electrical was at 95.41%. And from conversations that we've had previously, how many of those electrical tests had to be retaken because there was heat damage or some form of something not right with the electrical test?
That's I'd have to take that query away and find out obviously where we've done a second test. I know that obviously you and I had a conversation about one particular court where I've had a retest done for us. I'll have to take that one away and find out where we've got to do 2 retests.
Okay. Right, thanks, Ian. I have got a question. I did have a question actually on that same item in this. So I'll jump the queue if you don't mind. And it might just be a presentation point. So on electrical there in paragraph 7 in the table, it says that the trajectory there is up. So, you know, suggesting that compliance is going up. And that is the case for domestic, obviously a slight increase, but actually for communal, it's just under a 2% drop. So I suppose a presentational point, the arrows could probably do with applying, as long as I'm reading this right, the arrows should probably be like for like, so there should be 2 sets of arrows there. So we're looking at domestic trajectory and communal trajectory, but also just any information you've got around why there was that 2% drop then, or context.
Your first point, yeah, we'll take that away. So as a presentation, it comes across better. The 2% drop on communals is off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I can't remember the detail, but I can take that away and provide you a list of the properties that made up 97 points. Sorry, the list of properties that made up failures in January and the list of the properties that made up the failures in July to show. Then we can obviously explain in more detail why that 2% drop is. It's probably just a case of timing and not getting access, but I can't provide a comprehensive response to your question.
It's not a huge change, but I just thought it was worth just checking if there was any particular reason behind that. Okay, so back to the list. So we've got Councillor Reid next and then Councillor Stanley.
Going back to the getting access to the properties that you can't get in. Basically, your housing officers are really brilliant at doing that, especially in the flats. But are they allowed to have access to the ones in the community the way they are in the flats? Because they do work, even though they're not supposed to, but they do even help the mental health in the flats as well. They gain access there. I think if you put some more information to your housing officers, they are absolutely brilliant in the big blocks of flats of getting access with some of the most awkward clients in the community.
there was a question in there, more a point, but worthwhile point, absolutely. Kathy, if you want to respond.
I think although it wasn't a question, just to come back to you, Councillor Reid, and our housing officers would use the same methods and have the same authority to try and gain access into our individual homes as they would to any of our flats. They're very well engaged with the team. They work collaboratively to try and get access.
Yeah. Sorry, did they have the same? And just a praise for your housing team. ASB that was dealt with an elderly lady was amazing response. So the team, they are doing an amazing job on the ASB team. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm sure that's noted. Councillor Stanley.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll give the officers time to follow me on this one. I'm now going to refer to page 49, paragraph 6 of that page, and going down the list, I'm now looking at number 3. This is very, very concerning. I'm a little bit lost to understand it. It's going back, these are completed by August 2023. And then it's a question I thought Councillor Henley would have asked this one as regard to fire safety, which said there was 500 outstanding fire risk assessments, and it's supposed we have more than 8,000 overdue. Where are we with those figures, please?
Ian.
So there's 2 parts to that. One is the fire risk assessment. Now in the table that's set out there, the fire risk assessments were at 88%, even though we've visited 100% of the properties. So all properties are now have got an FRA. We're just waiting for the validation of those 12%, which were reported negatively in here, which we're hoping to get back within the next 2 to 3 months so that we can continue to report 100% like what we've done. On the FRA, then comes actions. You'll see there, obviously, the report stated 8,000 overdue remedial actions. A great deal of work has been done over the last 2 years to reduce that down. We now hover around £1,000, 1,100, excuse me, 1,000, 1,100 as an ongoing WIP, which we accept is probably the norm for the number of properties that we've got, the types of properties that we've got, and the age of the properties that we've got. And that's a figure that the regulator is also comfortable with.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just come back there. In the report, it just clearly said we're going back to August 2 years ago. And it was also reported we got more than 8,000 overdue. All the question was, how many have we got overdue currently?
I'm thinking Ian might have answered that there, but with the 1,011.
Yeah, correct. Yes, sorry, yeah.
So we got 1,000 overdue.
So we, at any point in time, we have around 1,000 fire risk actions live, some of which are overdue. Not all are overdue. But if in future reports, I can provide a breakdown of the fire risk actions as well, if that will help.
So just to clarify, just to understand why that 8,000 figure's there, that's not the current figure. Is that the figure from August 23?
That's the figure that was correct at the point myself referred in March 23.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
Mr.
that
Chairman,
figure's not current, that's a couple of years old now.
That's why I was querying the date where we were from that particular date. But what comes to mind, and I'm not trying to stir things up, but Grenville, with the situation we had there, we really need to be 100% on the ball about these type of issues, especially as Councillor Ender referred to earlier with high-rise flats. We've still got a large amount of those in Broglio and House Owen and areas like that. Fortunately, I represent the north of the borough and we never built any. So we don't have that problem. But a previous housing officer decided, and I agreed with him some years ago, that some of the blocks we could afford to dispose of. And these were 2 blocks that caused a bit of a sensation at the time in Dudley when we demolished them. But having said that, it still leaves Dudley with a few. But you talk about Gornal, Sedgley, Coasley, then we haven't got the high rise. Yeah, we've got low rise, but not high rise. But it was just my concern about the safety in respect of what we spoke about earlier and what we spoke about earlier, the age of some of these buildings over the years since they were built. And, you know, they do take a lot more looking after now than what they did when they were first put there. And I'll stop at that.
Okay, Kathy, I thought you might come back probably with some context around that.
And it was just really, I just wanted to make sure we were really, really clear that at the point of our regulatory notice, the regulator said that there were 8,000 outstanding fire remedial actions. When Ian talks about there being around 1,000 at any time, none of those 1,000 are left over from those 8,000. So those were all dealt with. And it's just important to say we're having fire risk assessments done on a daily or weekly basis. They will always generate actions because if there happens to be, I don't know, some rubbish in the communal area of a block, when the fire risk assessor goes there, it will go down as an action. So I just wanted to be really, really clear that those actions were all dealt with. And when we talk about having around 1,000 at any time, it's because they come through on a daily or weekly basis from the ongoing fire risk assessments that we do. And they're dealt with, they drop off. Every time one drops off, another one comes on from a new assessment. So I just wanted to make it clear about that 8,000. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied with the reply there,
Okay.
but I've still got queries in my mind.
Okay, thank you. It's just a point that makes me wonder on that. So I know, Ian, you said it was within the industry standard, if you like. So that's the context around it. And when we say industry standard, then is that as a percentage of our total stock? So is that kind of that 1,000 properties of our total stock? That's where that's the marker, is it? Or the number of actions FRAs outstanding based on the number of stock? I'm just trying to understand what that standard is that we are happy with within, but what is that standard? How's it measured?
In terms of what is the appropriate width, it's difficult to identify a normal industry standard because not every landlord has the same number of firehouse buildings or the same number of properties that fall within the regulatory requirements to carry out an FRA. It's a figure that we've looked at, and the focus really is more on how fast you can turn the actions around rather than the volume of them. Again, like I said, in the future reports, I'll provide an update of actions being both in date and out of date, so you can see that. And again, just to give the point of assurance that when we've gone through this in detail with the regulator on a regular basis, they are comfortable with that 1,000 live actions at any point in time, appropriate for our stock size and the number of properties that fall within the FOS and the requirement for an FRA.
Okay, yep, that's helpful.
I think I've answered your point. On that.
You've answered it. You know, it's not as clear cut as me asking for a percentage, is it, from what you've said there? Correct. So yeah, I understand it. And I think the point to take away is obviously the regulator has seen all the figures, all the nuances here in Dudley, and they're happy with what we're doing. So yeah, I think we're all clear on that. Okay, then, unless there's any other questions, I think that moves us on to the next item. Actually, no, I meant to say about recommendations, aren't I, Steve, on this new script? Is everybody happy with the recommendations that are noted on the item in the paper? Everybody happy? Yeah. Great stuff. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9. It's about any questions that have been given with appropriate notice. I think there haven't been any questions submitted. So on that, I say thank you, everybody, for your questions tonight. I think it's been a good meeting, and safe journey home. Thank you.